Welcome back to the Lost in Transit podcast, everyone. I am your host, Spud Groshong. Does the winter weather have you down? Do you just battle that polar vortex? If so, I believe today's podcast is for you. Today I've put together a list of 5 exotic locations that we as Americans do not need a passport to go to. Now, before I begin, I need to put out a disclaimer. The only reason you don't need a passport to go to these places is they are U.S. territories. However, if you fly to them through other countries, you will more than likely still need a passport. Okay, we'll start in the Caribbean. Destination number 1, the U.S. Virgin Islands. Now, the Virgin Islands are not terribly far from the States. They're about a 3-hour flight from Miami. They consist of 3 islands: St. Croix, St. John's, and St. Thomas. Each is a little different. St. Croix is kind of removed. It's also the biggest of them. On St. Croix, I would suggest channeling your inner Jack Sparrow and taking a tour of a rum factory. The U.S. Virgin Islands National Park takes up 2/3 of St. John's, which is meant to have breathtaking snorkeling and incredible scuba-diving. Charlotte Amalie on St. Thomas is the most popular cruise port and shopping area in all of the Caribbean. If you find yourself in St. Thomas on a Monday and you want to rub elbows with some locals, take the $5 water taxi to Water Island and check out Monday Movie Night. Now, destination number 2 is only about a half-hour flight from the U.S. Virgin Islands in the Caribbean. It's also the only other place in the Caribbean that you don't need a passport to visit, and that is Puerto Rico. Now, Puerto Rico is great. It's the only place on the list that I've been, and I would advise going even if I wasn't doing this. The weather is almost perfect all the time, unless, of course, it's hurricane season, then, well, you've got to be on the lookout, like anywhere. Old San Juan is beautiful. Tons of shops, tons of museums, tons of plazas with trees covering. It's just gorgeous. There's a 16th century Spanish fort in Old San Juan as well. I guess that just depends on what you're looking for. Now, if you're trying to get out of the city, the El Yunque National Forest is a rainforest that's about 45 minutes southeast of San Juan. It's a great place to hike. It's a great place to climb mountains, see some of the wildlife that Puerto Rico has to offer. If that's not your thing either, and you're just looking to hit the beach and hang out in the sun, I would suggest hitting picturesque Flamenco Bay on the island of Solibra. Now, if I said that wrong, please tell me. But it's typical, beautiful beach. Palm trees hanging over the sand and mountains and blue water. It's gorgeous. And then another thing that you could do is check out Mosquito Bay on Vieques Island. Now, Mosquito Bay was in the Guinness Book of World Records for being the brightest bioluminescent bay in the world. Now, if you don't know what bioluminescent bay is, if you've ever seen a firefly or a glowworm, that's bioluminescence. So in this bay, there are fish, and there are krill, and there are even algae that have this bioluminescence in them that light up the water. It's rather cool. And if none of that sounds like your cup of tea, and you just want to go to the south side of the island, find a beach to yourself, stare off into the Caribbean, that's also A-okay in our book. Destination number 3 is a little further away. Destination number 3 is America Samoa, which is in the South Pacific. The only way to get there is to transfer through Hawaii from a flight to the States. And if I remember correctly, there are only 2 flights a week. So it gives you some time to kind of decide. Now, America Samoa is made up of 5 islands and 2 atolls. Like I said, you would fly in from Hawaii. You would fly to Pago Pago, which is the capital. And then if you wanted to go to a different island, you would have to fly from there. America Samoa is home to one of the least visited national parks in the national park system. And that's the National Park of American Samoa. However, it's the South Pacific. The scenery in these islands rival Tahiti or Fiji. Blue water as far as the eye can see, tall green mountains. Actually, one of the islands in America Samoa has the highest sea cliffs in the Pacific. It's outstanding. And it's as far from America that you can get, I think, without a passport. It's definitely the closest to, like I said, Tahiti or Fiji you can get without a passport. All right, so on to destination number 4. Destination number 4 is in the Western Pacific, and that is Guam. Guam is one of those places that, well, I always heard about growing up because that's where my stepdad said he'd send me if I ever acted up. Well, here I am, wanting to go to Guam. The locals in Guam are called the Chamorro people, and again, if I said that wrong, please feel free to chastise me. But one of the things to do is to learn about the culture and learn about their way of life. If you're more wanting to go outdoorsy, you can head to the interior of the island and hike through the rainforest. Or, of course, there's always white sand beaches and blue water like all of the other destinations. That's kind of what makes them tropical and exotic, I guess. A couple cool things like Guam has that I guess some of these other places don't, or they weren't something I found about. There are a few Japanese shipwrecks from World War II in Guam that you can scuba dive to. Also, Guam has a very popular scuba spot called the Blue Hole. Now, the Blue Hole is like just an opening. It's a shaft that drops some 300 plus feet into the ocean. If you've seen pictures of it, it looks astounding. One more thing that's kind of cool that you could tell your friends you did is you can hire a boat to take you over the Marianas Trench. Now, the Marianas Trench is the deepest part of any ocean, so you could, tell your friends you were there. And number 5 on the list. Number 5 is actually not too far north of Guam. It is called the Northern Mariana Islands. Now, a large part of the Northern Mariana Islands, their history is World War II based. A lot of World War II things. There are shipwrecks you can dive. There's a War of the Pacific park you can visit. There are 14 different islands, but it seems like only 3 of them are very much the main ones. There's Saipan, Tinian, and Rota. If you were to fly in to the Northern Mariana Islands, you have to fly through Guam to Saipan and then from wherever the rest of your destination goes. These are the 5 places that aren't U.S. states. They are territories that you don't need a passport for. I was going to add Hawaii to this list, but Hawaii is a state. Everyone knows about Hawaii. You can go there tomorrow if you want. You could also go to any of these places tomorrow if you want. However, they're a little bit different. Now, that being said, that they are U.S. territories, I can almost guarantee that your cell phone will not work in these places, so you will want a local SIM or maybe that T-Mobile worldwide plan, or however, maybe just disconnect. Most of them run on American money. I actually think they all do. Yes, and as I said before, you will need a passport if you are transferring through another country to get to one of these places. So, your best bet for any of the places in the Pacific are to fly through Hawaii. Which, you're there already. Why not knock that one off the list too? Anyways, it's just a little something I've been thinking about. Now remember, if you're listening to this somewhere other than iTunes, please head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the podcast, rate the podcast, review the podcast. It means a lot more than you know, and it helps a lot more than you know. If you're not following us on social media, you can follow us on Instagram at Lost in Transit Podcast. It used to be Lost in Transit PC, but I've since changed it to Lost in Transit Podcast. I'm on Twitter, Lost in Transit PC. You can also find us on Facebook at Lost in Transit PC. Feel free to email me, especially with some of the words in here. I know I pronounced them wrong. I would love to hear you correct me on what words I said wrong. And who knows, I probably said a bunch of English words wrong too. But email is lostintransitpc@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Spud Groshong, Groshong. And until next week, get lost.